Today I want to break down another Stoic quote. This time it's by the philosopher Epictetus, and the quote goes as such. No person is free who is not master of himself. Now, I love this quote, mainly because there's a lot to unpack within that very terse one, but the primary one for me is the paradox, which is you can't be free unless you are the master of something. Now, obviously, there's going to be a quick little 1-2 with the fact that you essentially where the paradox is that you essentially have to be a slave to yourself. That's at least the first location that my mind went anyway. It's almost that you have to constantly be this taskmaster of yourself in order to truly be free. And maybe this is sort of an excessive reading of it, but we're going to take it in this one direction before we branch off into another thought. I think this paradox is really interesting to explore because, again, it really shows that ideology which comes in with it. Because, again, how can you be free? You would associate freedom with just being solo. You're accountable to your own self, but there is that paradox within freedom because you still have to be in charge of yourself. You still have to go abide by social norms. You have to master your own self in the sense of you need to have your responsibility, your virtue, and so on and so forth. This can quickly spiral into a conversation of is there such a thing as free will or freedom or whatever else? But we're not gonna touch that because that's a whole nother video in and of itself. I like that paradox, though, the sense of you have to be a slave to yourself in order to be free. I don't necessarily agree with that, but the paradox itself is a fun idea to play with. Essentially, what I think the quote is trying to get at is that you must be fully in charge of yourself in order to be truly free, in order to be an agent within the world. Now, I don't necessarily agree with I agree in principle, but the quote itself does sort of lend itself to a very Cartesian way of thinking, in the sense of, there is that duality of mind and body. I don't necessarily, as I mentioned in previous videos, I don't think that way. I think we're a single unified unit. Like, we don't have bodies, we are bodies. And so in that sort of a sense, I don't necessarily agree with some of it, if agree is the right word, but I do like the message, which is essentially you have to take that responsibility for yourself, and you need to be in charge of all of your own shit, for lack of a better word. You need to be in charge of your virtue, your morality, your finances, your physical health, your mental health, everything. And ultimately, the buck stops with you. And I think that's, again, turning it around, and perhaps I'm overanalyzing, but the person with the highest authority, that's where the buck stops, right? So essentially, let's say, for example, if you're in the army, then the buck stops with the commander. The commander essentially is like, okay, I'm in charge of all of these people. Essentially, they take on that responsibility for everybody else. And you almost have to, and I think perhaps that's what the quote is trying to say, is that because you are your commander, you are your own master, the buck stops with you for your responsibility, and you have to be in charge of your own self. And that's what makes you free, because you don't have another person telling you what to do, what to eat, and so on and so forth. So I do like the quote. There are some paradoxes within there. Epictetus is the big homie. Shout out to him. But yeah, I like this quote particularly for that paradox of you have to be a slave to yourself. You are both master and slave. and in order to be truly free. So I wouldn't necessarily say fun, because slavery is obviously not fun, but it's an interesting thought to explore. It's intellectual catnip, for lack of a better word. So anyway, that's the Stoic quote for this week. Let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. Feel free to drop a like on the video as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching.